Please welcome up Pastor Mike.
Well, thanks everyone for coming today. I know that the weather is not exactly great for getting out and going to church, but I appreciate you all being here. And I apologize for the parking lot and the sidewalks. I know it's not as cleaned off as it could be, but I hope none of you tripped and fell or anything. So, you know, it's basically the last sermon that I'll be giving this year. And that's kind of interesting because I was just thinking about how at the beginning of the year, which really didn't seem like very long ago, I gave a sermon and, was talking about, these are the things I would hope to accomplish this year. I'm actually really looking forward to going back and looking at those notes and seeing what did we accomplish, because I don't really remember. This is bad, but I don't really remember what those goals were. I remember a few goals. I remember we really wanted to start a young couples ministry, and we did do that. Not as often as we wanted to, but we have started it. And there was other things I don't really remember so clearly, but I'm looking forward to seeing, looking back at this year, like what can we look at and say, oh, we accomplished this, or we grew in this way, or maybe we didn't focus on this as much as we should have, or something like that. So, I'm looking forward to the new year. I'm looking forward to a fresh beginning, and I'm actually planning to do like a midnight prayer on December 30th or 31st or whatever it is, and come together here, whoever wants to, and just kind of, take some time for a new beginning and to reflect and pray about, what's this year been like for all of us individually and, as a community, and really to look forward to the new year with the hope for what we could potentially do together and also individually and in our families. So, I welcome all of you to join us on midnight New Year's Eve to spend that time together. I think it'll be really nice. I'm looking forward to it a lot. Adonia and I are leaving on Tuesday. We're going to be going to visit my relatives, or her relatives in Missouri, and then I'm going to visit my relatives in Iowa. And oh yeah, thank you. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. There's been a lot of stressful things, and it's going to be nice to take an opportunity away from cell phone reception and things like that to kind of readjust ourselves, and I was looking through my Facebook feed a few weeks back, and this conversation popped up. These people were talking about this book that they thought was really interesting. It's called The Christian Atheist. Have any of you heard of it? Yeah. So I haven't read it yet, but I got the audiobook, so I'm looking forward to listening to it during the long drive. But the basic premise of the book is that there are many people in the world that believe in God. Many people in the world who, I think I looked it up. There was, according to Wikipedia, which I don't know if this is accurate or not, but there's over 2 billion Christians and 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. And then, of course, many other people of different religions and people who don't believe in religion. And so many, many different people, different kinds of people who believe in God. But the author of this book is a pastor, and he wrote about how he recognized that you have many people who come to church or who do things that are quote unquote religious, but oftentimes when you look at the fruit of their life, the actions or the results of their actions, then it doesn't always show that there is actually a true belief in God. It's kind of like just recognizing that there is God, and then I just live my life the way I want to. And he himself recognized that he started. I'm just reading from the summary. Sorry, I haven't read the book yet. But he himself was saying that he started to recognize actually he himself fit that description, even though he was a pastor and he believed in God. But he recognized that even though he believed in God and he taught about living a life with God, but he actually relied a lot on his own ability as a leader, as a pastor, as a charismatic person to accomplish things in the church and in his life. And he realized that he didn't really feel like he actually needed God in his life. And he realized that even though he believed in God, he was living his life not really relying or having much of a relationship with God. And so I kind of was thinking about that for a while, and it kind of just seeing the title, Christian Atheist, really started me thinking about myself. And I was thinking to myself, am I like a unificationist atheist? Do I believe in God, but like, how much does that actually have an influence on how I live my life? Like, how much do I live my life in relationship to God or trusting in God versus like relying on my own ability or my own ability to get up here and speak something that sounds good, or to get things done. Because really, in a life of faith, you want to believe that God is working in your life, is working in our church and our community to do things that are bigger than what we could accomplish just with our own personal effort. But sometimes it's really hard to believe in that. Sometimes it's really hard to trust that that's actually going to happen. But it really got me thinking about how, I know many people who don't really believe in religion per se, but they have some kind of spiritual experience, or they have some kind of, they still believe in God. They believe there must be a God. I've had this experience, I know that there must be a God. But believing in religion is another thing, which is kind of interesting because when you look at the past, in the past, and of course I'm not a historian or anything like that, but just from what I've seen and what I've observed and learned, religion was really, there was a lot of more focus on the traditions. If to be a religious person, what does it mean? Oftentimes, like for example, if you're a Catholic, then you go to Mass, you get communion, you go through all the different baptism and the Eucharist and the confessions and the Rosary. There's many different things you do, right? And then also for other faiths too, like my grandparents, when they were alive in Japan, they had a little shrine in their home that it was really beautiful. Actually, you open the doors and it's so beautifully made. And every day you go and you put food in there. You put a little cup of rice as a way to honor your ancestors and your faith. And then of course if you're Buddhist, you go to the Buddhist temple. You give money. You like the wooden spoon with the water and there's so many different ways to which people have practiced belief in God throughout history. But when we look at times now, we see that a lot of people, especially young people, really question, why do we do these kind of traditions? Why do I have to go to church and listen to some guy who's just another person like me give a sermon when I could go and listen to the TED Talk on YouTube and it'd be just as inspiring? Or why should I follow morals? What's where does that come from? Why do I have to live that kind of a life? Is it just because that's what religion tells me to do? And I really feel that when you look at different faiths, in religion in general, has not always had answers for those kinds of questions. If someone was to question, why do I have to live this kind of life? Why can't I do these kind of things that my friends are doing? Or, why should I give money? Or so on and so forth. Oftentimes the answer is, that's what we do. Or we need to have faith, or because the Bible said so, or because, there's different reasons. But I personally feel like those are not really satisfying, at least for me. Like, I don't want to live that kind of life just because that is a good kind of life to live, or because that's expected of me, or because those are the traditions that are a part of my faith. Is everything okay? Okay. And I think that one of the things that I really love about our teaching about the divine principle is two particular things that I really feel make the difference in terms of living a certain way of life because it's the religious way to live, or because it's a good way to live, or because that will get us to heaven or something like that, versus a real practical, concrete understanding that really makes sense to me. And I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint today, but the first one is individual spiritual growth. This kind of concept is actually really unique to our teaching. And I know that some people have been teaching other people divine principle, and they're like, yeah, I've never heard this point before about spiritual growth. It doesn't really exist in other faiths. I mean, maybe it does in some. But this idea that through doing certain kind of actions, and through following our conscience, and through immersing ourselves in God's words, actually our spirit grows through different levels, and we become more elevated spiritually. We become brighter, better people. And that kind of like when we are in the womb, if we don't develop fully, then when we come out into the world, then we may be handicapped, or we don't have all the ability to live a normal life like everybody else. And so it's like that with the spirit world too, right? We know this. We know that if we don't develop ourselves as wholesome human beings the way God originally intended, then when we go to the spirit world, then we're kind of handicapped. But that's a little bit scary, but for me, really meaningful, because it means that actually the actions and the efforts that I make in this life actually really make a difference in terms of how able I am to be free when I go to the spirit world someday in the far future, I hope. In my ability to be close with God and to be able to relate with God, both here in this life and when I go to the spirit world. For me, it's much more liberating to understand that than to believe that regardless of how I live my life, as long as I ask, God for salvation or Jesus for salvation, even in the last few moments of my life, that I'll go to heaven. I understand the appeal of that, but I actually can relate a lot more with this kind of concept. And it gives me a lot of more reason, like maybe why should I care about people? Why should I live a good life? Why should I give of myself for others and sacrifice of myself for others? It's not just about being a good person, or because that's, following in the footsteps of Jesus or other spiritual leaders. It's not just because of karma, because what goes around comes around, but actually fundamentally in the end, we're following the blueprint for which God intended for us to grow, to mature from being and our spirit from being, you know, like babies to becoming mature adults that know and are freely able to give love and represent God in this world. The other point that I really love about our faith in this context is the idea of the ideal, of God's original plan. We had a guy come to our workshop, the first workshop we did, Aaron, and I really appreciate everyone who invested a lot into him, especially Mr. Okada. I'm really grateful. People invested a lot into him, and he had a really wonderful experience, actually, coming to our community and meeting people, and he was like, yeah, I never heard before that this idea that God had a plan, that there was actually an ideal that we're working towards getting back to. I wrote him a couple weeks ago because he hasn't been communicating with us, or anyway, he decided to pursue Buddhism because that's what his girlfriend has encouraged him to do. But he had a wonderful experience with us, and I think that I'm going to keep in touch with him and try to keep that door open for him. But it illustrates the point that you look at other teachings about God and about religion, and you don't really see this kind of a concept of what are we trying to. Okay, so there was a fall, or there was some kind of coming away from God. But what was that original thing that would have been if there was no fall, if there was no separation from God? And nobody really talks about that. And I really love how we talk about that. We have this, I mean, even though we're not like obviously there, but it gives something for us to work towards. It gives us a vision of, what did God originally want for his children? What did God originally want for all of us individually to have in our lives? Why is there a spirit world for us to go to after the physical world? And why do we go through the things in life that we go through? And even though it's hard for us to envision what it looks like to live in this ideal world. The idea that actually God had a plan and that we're trying to work towards recreating that world, even though, it may seem far away, is inspiring for me because it gives a why. Instead of just living a certain kind of life or doing certain kinds of things, we actually have something that we're working towards. We have a goal, and it's not just about following traditions or being a religious person. And I think that that's really liberating for me, because sometimes I get tired of trying to be a good person, or I get tired of trying to live for others, or trying to invest into the things that I know I should invest into reading God's words and living for others and prayer. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of why those things are important in our lives. Because, yeah, you get busy, but I think also that we lose sight of why am I even doing this? I had that experience. I started a condition where I was praying and I was reading every day, waking up in the morning, and over time I just lost, like, why am I even doing this? And I really was questioning myself, am I just doing this because this is something that I should do? Like good unificationists should be reading Hundoke and praying every day, these kind of making conditions. Or is there something that I'm actually working towards? Is there a purpose and a goal that I'm trying to accomplish? And I think that's when I talk with when I talk with other young people who are disheartened or feel they're distant from religion or religious practice, I oftentimes get the feeling that this is not. They don't really understand the purpose of why. Why should I live that kind of life? just because my parents did it or just because religion says I should. We know that God never intended for there to be religion in the first place. God never intended for there to be church. He didn't tell Adam and Eve, okay, be fruitful, multiply, have dominion, then go to church every Sunday and make sure you pray and read Hundoke and give your tithe and don't forget to live for the sake of others. And what else is there? I don't remember. But there's other things too, right? You gotta pray every time at this certain time of the day and do the rosary and whatever. We know that God never intended for things to be that way. But at the same time, there is a process through which we have to go through to get back to this ideal that we're trying to work towards, this state of being where humanity is in oneness with God, where we don't need to be reminded to connect with God. That was the original ideal, right? That God was just a natural part of our life, right? We understand that if there had been no fall, we could communicate and see and talk with our ancestors and people in the spirit world. They would just be standing here next to us as if they were regular people. Well, we don't live in that kind of world. So doing these kind of things is helpful. It's helpful to come to church. I love listening to the music. It does something to me. I don't know, hard to explain. I love, sometimes I don't want to hear a sermon. Sometimes I don't want to hear a message. I just want to deal with the things that I'm dealing with on my own. But many times in my life, hearing a sermon or listening to one of my dad's lectures or whatever has just sparked something within me that really made me think about my life or the certain aspect of my life that I was neglecting or I wasn't paying attention to. Actually, many times coming to church or listening to a lecture has helped me to become a better person, has inspired me to look at myself in a way that I never looked at myself before. And so even though doing things like coming to church is not part of God's original plan, at the same time, I know that God is trying to speak to each and every one of us. And my experience has taught me that when I open ways in which for God to speak through me by coming to church or by praying, by reaching out to God, then that opens up the way for God to reach out to me and to speak to me. Because frankly, most of the time I get caught up in doing things. That's what my life practically feels like some of the time. I'm just doing stuff all the time. And I don't even sometimes pay attention to what God may be wanting to tell me. I love my dad's sermon, my dad's talk about this. He talks about this regularly, about how, he came to a point in his life where God had to make him stop what he was doing in order to be able to tell him something. And, I'm my father's son, so I think there's some similarities there. I also get really, I get really into doing stuff over and over again. I make a long to-do list, and I'm like, these are important things that I need to do. And I think there's a certain part of me that also feels like, well, if I get all these things done, then maybe I'm doing a good job as a pastor or something like that. But it's a very important point because every time that I've really sincerely reached out to God, searching for answers, I always feel like those answers have come back to me. And if following traditions and living a certain kind of life can help us to have that kind of experience more in our lives, then I think it's good. It's a means to an end, but it's not an end in and of itself. We're not going to be going to church and doing these kind of traditions forever. But if it helps us to become better people, if it helps us to become more like God, if it helps us to mature ourselves spiritually, then it's a great tool. It's a great thing that we have. We're fortunate. But we have to remind ourselves we're lucky in a lot of ways, that we have this teaching, we have this understanding, because many people, they're happy to do it, you know. This is to be faithful, to follow the way of being a religious person. But they don't have the benefit of having this knowledge about what is the ideal that we're working towards, and what does it actually mean to grow myself, and what actually happens when I go to the spirit world. I'm really inspired by Roger. Oh yeah, I want to thank Roger for doing this baseboard. Thank you, Roger. It looks great. And I want to thank Francois too. He's been helping. Yeah, he rolled his eyes. He's been helping with Catherine. You know, Catherine's been doing the food bank. But you know, Nobuyuki-san's been in Japan for the last few weeks, so Francois has been there to basically do the heavy lifting. So thank you, Francois. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Right. So Roger has really taken it upon himself to use his Facebook as a way to teach the world about the spirit world. And if you are not Facebook friends with Roger, you should friend him, because he's always putting stuff up about, well, have you ever wondered about what's going to happen to you when you die? And he just puts it all up there. You know, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, very unapologetically. It's very cool. And it's true, though. You know, the life we live now is a life being lived for, not for the sake of just going through the day-to-day monotonous things. Of course, there's certain things we got to do. We got to make money. We got to take care of our family, our kids. We've got to do the best we can in our lives. But ultimately, we're living for the spirit world. We're living for the time where we can shed off this cumbersome body and free ourselves and go to a world that's so much more better. Here's a quote from the Divine Principle. Most people are attached to their earthly life. They regret its passing because due to the fall they are ignorant of the fact that after they discard their clothes of flesh, they are meant to live forever in the beautiful and eternal spirit world. The transition from physical life to life in the spirit world may be compared to the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. If the caterpillar had self-awareness, it might feel the same attachment to its limited existence, climbing about the leaves of a plant as people do to their earthly life. It too would probably be reluctant to end its existence as a caterpillar, unaware that it is destined to enter a new phase of life as a butterfly, when it will enjoy fragrant flowers, and sweet nectar to its heart's content. So, in all the things that we do in our life, we have to remind ourselves that ultimate goal is not to simply lead a certain kind of life or follow certain traditions or do things a certain way, but ultimately we are working to become wholesome people, that when we do go to the spirit world, that we can be free there to live as God intended for us to live. And everything that we do in our lives, whether it's living by morals or ethics, doing traditions, is all part of that. But they're not the goal in and of itself. So anyway, as we come to the end of the year, this is a really good time for us to reflect upon, how much did I live my life this year for the spirit world? Not literally, but I don't think any of you are going anywhere anytime soon, or I hope. But how much are we living our lives towards things that we know are really important? One of the most fulfilling experiences I had this year was doing this Welcome Center. I mean, it's not 100% done yet, but it's been such a fulfilling experience for us as pastors because we were able to kind of envision something new, and then with the help of many, many people, transform that into something completely different. And it reminds me of the part of the divine principle where it talks about co-creatorship and how God created us to be co-creators. He created us to be people that follow in his footsteps in being creating new things in our lives. Of course, our families are a big part of that, probably the biggest part of that, but also to have a vision. What do I want to do in my life? What do I want to see happen? And then be able to take that from an idea to being a reality. And I'm just blown away whenever I walk into that room. And also a big part of that for me is seeing the community. When we first came here over 2 years ago, also we had a certain vision for like what kind of community do we want to be a part of? What kind of community do we want to live in? And to see the community becoming like that, step by step, is also incredibly fulfilling. And I thank you. I really thank you all for being a part of this journey. And we really look forward to 2017. And next week, we have a guest speaker because we won't be here. And you're really fortunate to be able to hear. My dad's going to be giving the Christmas sermon. So thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you on New Year's. Thank you very much. Oh, well, I can't take credit for that. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everybody.
All right. And now for our announcements. So the next presentation by Dr. Hendrick will be next Sunday at 12. Sorry. Oh, it's today. Sorry. Today at 12:30. The title is Spirit World and Returning Resurrection. And then today is the Christmas party after lunch. There's a baking contest. Santa Claus will be here. And then there's also ice skating at a nearby rink downtown. Baking contest with prizes. So next Sunday is Christmas, and we'll have a Christmas service at noon on Sunday and a potluck lunch. So please bring something to share. So celebrating the 3rd anniversary CIVM, if I'm saying that correctly, they're having a celebration on December 30th from 6 to 9. Each guest will receive a signed copy of the workbook. Uncle Jazz will share a brief overview of how the CIVM board developed and a testimony in believing in your individual in your individual ideals. There will be delicious hors d'oeuvres and improv comedy, musical performances, so looks like a good time. Please RSVP with Jazz Smith. So for those of you who are interested in attending an upcoming Divine Principle workshop in Las Vegas, here are some upcoming dates. And the church will help with a large portion of the cost. So if you're interested, please let the pastors know. I'd also, at this time, like to invite Pastor Mike back up for the following announcements.
So the 2017 calendars are available. We're going to be ordering them directly from New York. So I need an actual figure of how many you want to order, because we're not just going to order a big box like we have in the past. So can I just get a show of hands? How many right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, 18. All right, so all 18, some more other people, I'll order like 25 or so. Okay, great. Actually, a lot of people aren't here today. All right, great. Good to know. And then I just want to point out one thing. You know, Claire was cleaning the playroom downstairs, but with her pregnancy and everything and the baby, it's been difficult for her to come. So if there's anyone who would be inspired about taking over, it doesn't need a lot of maintenance. It just needs someone to go in there every couple weeks and, you know, straighten up the train table. And there's a lot of scuff marks on the wall. And, you know, I mean, they've accumulated there over the last 6 or 8 months. So if there's anyone who's willing to just take a magic eraser and just try to get some of those scuff marks off, just to make the room look a little more, you know, fresh, then that would really be helpful in that room. You know, we have our young kids playing in there. We want it to be clean and sanitary. And next week is the potluck, if you're coming. And the Geschwin family is ushering in the Moklo. Actually, that's not right, is it? Sorry, I forgot to update that. I don't know. If you are, this is the calendar for the new year. So I just want to make sure that you're not surprised when January 1st comes along and you realize that you're cooking or something. So, Carol, do you know if Roger knows that you guys are cooking on the 1st? Right, okay. But he does know, but he wants to change. Okay. Right. And then I know Jameson's and Tamayo signed up for that. Mahardy's, you're good for the January 22nd? And Justine, you're good for the 29th? Okay, great. All right. Thank you, everybody. Let's have the band come back on stage for our final song. Please rise to join us.